They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But when you're standing outside a locked door in the middle of an aspen blizzard, watching your sister sip champagne by the fireplace while you slowly freeze to death, you realize that sometimes revenge needs to be served blazing hot, with a side of public humiliation. My name is Isabella Harper, though everyone calls me Bella, or at least they used to, back when I was still considered part of the family. This is the story of how I went from being the invisible daughter to the architect of my sister's spectacular downfall. It's a story about wolves, both the kind that howl in the Colorado wilderness and the kind that wear designer clothing and smile while they tear you apart. The night that changed everything started like so many others at the Aspen Ridge Lodge, the luxury mountain retreat that I had poured my soul into designing. It was supposed to be our crowning achievement, mine and my sister Seraphina's, though if you asked her, she'd tell you it was all her vision. She had a talent for that, my sister, for taking credit so smoothly that even I sometimes forgot whose ideas were whose. The lodge sat perched on a ridge overlooking the roaring Fork Valley, its massive windows framing the snow-covered peaks like works of art. I had spent 3 years perfecting every detail, from the reclaimed wood beams that gave it that coveted modern rustic aesthetic to the heated floors that kept guests comfortable even when temperatures dropped below zero outside. Every angle, every material choice, every clever use of space bore my signature, even if my actual signature appeared nowhere on the property. That February evening, Sarah was hosting what she called a soft launch party for potential investors and influencers. The great room was packed with people whose Instagram followers numbered in the millions: venture capitalists from Denver and Silicon Valley, and journalists from Architectural Digest and Dwell magazine. The champagne was Dom Perignon, the catering was from Matsuhisa, and the atmosphere was electric, with the kind of energy that only comes when beautiful people gather in a beautiful space to celebrate their own beauty. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Sarah held court near the massive stone fireplace I had designed to be the heart of the home. She wore a cream-colored cashmere dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her blonde hair twisted into an elegant chignon that made her look like she'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren ad. She was telling the story of how she'd conceived the lodge while skiing the Highland Bowl, how the vision had come to her fully formed, like Athena springing from Zeus's head. The challenge was finding someone who could execute my vision, she was saying to a group of rapt listeners that included the editor-in-chief of Mountain Living magazine. I am naturally a very heavy sleeper, so I wasn't sure how much time had passed when I woke up, to the sound of loud banging on the wall. The banging was rhythmic and forceful, coming from the shared wall between our room and Regina's. Then I heard the door open and David say, "Oh, so you want to be bad, huh?" The loud banging continued, now sounding like it was in the hallway right outside our door. I heard mumbling that literally sounded exactly like the way David talks to me during our intimate moments. My heart started racing as I sat up in bed, confused and disturbed by what I was hearing. I listened for several more minutes, and I could have sworn I heard Regina gasp. The sounds were unmistakably intimate, and I felt sick to my stomach. I got up and sat in front of the TV, which was next to the door, and put it on mute. The moment I did that, the banging stopped almost immediately, as if they had heard me moving around and stopped whatever they were doing. I then heard shuffling and Regina's voice saying something I couldn't make out, followed by David responding, "Yes, ma'am." I heard David go downstairs for a few minutes. When he came back into the room, he was carrying a simple bowl of cereal. This was completely unlike him, as he usually prepared elaborate breakfasts for me on weekends. I looked at him carefully and noticed he appeared extremely nervous, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting with the bowl. I decided to confront him directly. "What was that noise?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. David looked even more nervous and stuttered before saying, "I was arguing with my mom. When I asked what the argument was about, he continued stuttering nonsense before finally saying they were arguing about a Christmas present. This explanation made absolutely no sense to me, and I told him so. Did the argument get physical? I pressed him. I was hearing very loud noises. He quickly said no, but his body language suggested otherwise. I kept asking what could have caused such loud sounds, suggesting maybe he was moving furniture or something. David began pacing around the room nervously, and then he said something that chilled. The sun climbed higher, the heat becoming unbearable. My throat was already dry. No phone, no water, no money. They had planned this perfectly. But as I finally stood up, brushing the dirt from my dress, something inside me crystallized. It wasn't despair or self-pity. It was rage. Pure, clean, purposeful rage. They thought they were discarding trash. They had no idea they were forging a weapon. The walk back to civilization took 8 hours. A trucker found me on the highway, delirious from heat exhaustion, and took me to the nearest hospital. The nurses were kind, gave me water and a place to rest. One of them, an older woman named Maria, sat with me as I told her what had happened. "They'll pay for this," she said quietly. "People like that always do." "No," I corrected her, meeting her eyes. "They'll pay because I'll make them pay." Maria studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "There's a women's shelter downtown. They can help you get back on your feet. But honey, revenge is a dangerous path." "So is abandoning your daughter in the desert," I replied. The shelter became my base of operations. During the day, I worked whatever jobs I could find, cleaning offices, washing dishes, anything that paid cash. But at night, I planned. I went to the public library and researched everything I could about my family. Their businesses, their connections, their secrets. And oh, the secrets I found. My father's investment firm, it turned out, had been cooking the books for years. Creative accounting that bordered on fraud, hidden offshore accounts, insider trading that he'd been careful about, but not careful enough. My mother had her own skeletons. Affairs with her personal trainer, her tennis coach, her best friend's husband. And Victoria, perfect Victoria, had cheated her way through college, paying other students to take her exams, plagiarizing her thesis, even faking volunteer work for her resume. But information without proof was useless. I needed evidence, and to get that, I needed to get back into their lives. You don't get to throw people away like garbage. There are consequences. My father emerged from his study, his face purple with rage. "Get out of my house immediately, or I'll call the police." "Please do," I said, settling onto the cream-colored sofa I'd never been allowed to sit on as a child. "I'm sure they'd be very interested to hear about how you abandoned me in the desert. Attempted murder, some might call it. The hospital has records. The trucker who found me has already given a statement. Would you like to explain to your business partners why you're being investigated for trying to kill your daughter?" The silence was beautiful. They stood there, my parents, and Victoria, who had just come out of her room, all staring at me like I was a bomb that might explode. "What do you want?" my father finally asked, his voice tight. "My room," I said simply. "I want my room back, my place in this family, until I decide I'm ready to leave. On my terms." They had no choice. The scandal would ruin them, so they let me stay.
watching me with suspicious eyes, treating me like a dangerous stranger in their midst. Which I was. I played the part of the traumatized daughter trying to reconcile with her family. I was quiet, accommodating, helpful even. I attended family dinners, smiled at their friends, pretended not to notice when they introduced Victoria as their daughter and me as a family friend staying with us. And all the while, I gathered evidence. I installed tiny cameras I'd bought with my saved wages in strategic locations. I recorded conversations, photographed documents left carelessly on desks, copied files from my father's computer when he forgot to lock it. I was patient, methodical, thorough. The turning point came 8 months later, at Victoria's engagement party. The same party my father had mentioned the morning they'd abandoned me. The penthouse was full of New York's elite, everyone who mattered in their social circle. My parents had reluctantly allowed me to attend, though I was under strict instructions to not embarrass them.
Mom asked careful questions, making sure to have me state clearly that these were my original ideas, my innovations, my vision. There were 6 videos in total, each one meticulously documenting different aspects of the project and my role as its true creator. The last one was dated just 3 days before Mom's death. "Richard," she said, looking directly at the camera, her voice weak but clear. "I know you're afraid of Serafina. I know she has some kind of hold over you that I've never fully understood. But please, don't let her destroy Isabella. Don't let her steal our daughter's future. The lodge is Bella's dream, her creation. If you have any love left for me, or for the daughter who actually carries my spirit, you'll make sure she gets the recognition she deserves." I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the hidden compartment, slipping the USB drive and documents into my jacket pocket. The door opened, and there was Sarah, her perfect face flushed with champagne and triumph. "There you are," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Hiding again?" "Really, Bella, it's embarrassing. We have important guests here and you're skulking around like some kind of ghost." "I was just looking for something," I said quietly. "Well, stop looking and start being useful. James Chen is asking technical questions I can't be bothered with. Go handle him, but don't you dare contradict anything I've said. Remember, you work for me." Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the videos I'd just watched, or the letter in my pocket, or the 5 years of accumulated rage, but I found myself standing straighter, meeting her eyes directly. "Actually, Sarah, I don't work for you. We're supposed to be partners." She laughed, that same broken glass sound. "Partners? Oh, Bella, you're delusional. You're barely an employee. You're more like, what's the word? An intern who never left. A charity case I keep around because Mom would have wanted me to." "Mom wanted us to work together," I said, my voice growing stronger. "She wanted us both to inherit the firm." "Mom was sick," Sarah said coldly. "Her brain was affected by the cancer. Nothing she said in those last months counted. Dad agrees with me. The lawyers agree with me. Everyone agrees with me except you, and frankly, your opinion has never mattered." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Oh, and Bella? After tonight, I think it's best if you work from home. Your presence here is confusing for the clients. They see you and think you're actually important, and then I have to waste time explaining that you're not. It's exhausting." She swept out, leaving me alone in the room that had once been our mother's sanctuary. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the USB drive in my pocket, the promise and threat it represented. Then I made my decision. I returned to the party, but not to handle James Chen's technical questions. Instead, I moved through the room like a ghost, invisible as always. but this time using that invisibility to my advantage. I took photos of everything: Sarah holding court, the brass plaque by the door that read, "Designed and built by Serafina Harper," the marketing materials that erased my existence entirely. When I finally approached James Chen, he was standing alone on the deck, looking out at the lights of Aspen twinkling below. "Mr. Chen," I said quietly, "you were asking about the passive solar design?" His face lit up. "Isabella!" "Yes, I'd love to hear about it. Your sister seemed a bit vague on the technical details." I smiled, the first genuine smile of the evening. "My sister is many things, but an engineer isn't one of them. Would you like to know how it really works?" For the next 20 minutes, I explained every aspect of the system I'd designed, from the calculation of heat gain coefficients to the integration with the smart home system. James listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he truly understood the complexity of what I'd achieved. "This is brilliant," he said finally. "Truly innovative. You should be presenting at the Sustainable Building Conference in Denver next month." "That's kind of you to say," I replied, "but Sarah handles all the public-facing aspects of the business." He frowned. "That seems like a waste of your talents." Before I could respond, Sarah appeared, her smile sharp as a blade. "James! I hope my sister hasn't been boring you with too many technical details. She gets a bit carried away sometimes. Doesn't really understand that clients want vision, not engineering minutiae." "On the contrary," James said, "I found it fascinating. Isabella clearly has a deep understanding of sustainable design principles." Sarah's eyes flashed dangerously. "Well, she should. I taught her everything she knows." She linked her arm through mine, her grip painfully tight. "Bella was just leaving, weren't you? You mentioned you weren't feeling well." I hadn't mentioned anything of the sort, but I recognized the warning in her voice. This was how it always went. Any time I received even the smallest recognition, Sarah would find a way to punish me for it later. Usually it was subtle: being excluded from meetings, having my ideas shot down, being assigned mindless tasks that kept me too busy to innovate. But something in her eyes tonight was different, more vicious. "Actually," I said, pulling my arm free, "I'm feeling fine." The temperature on the deck seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah's smile became frozen, her eyes arctic. "I think you're confused, Bella. You're definitely not feeling well. In fact, I think you need some fresh air. Why don't you take a walk?" "It's 10 degrees outside," James said, looking concerned. "And there's a blizzard warning." "Bella loves the cold," Sarah said, her voice sweet as antifreeze. "Don't you, sis? You're always saying the house is too warm." This was a lie. I was always cold, a fact Sarah knew and often exploited by keeping the thermostat low in my office. But I saw the game she was playing, the power move she was making in front of a potential investor. If I backed down now, she'd own me completely. If I stood my ground, she'd make me pay for it later. "You know what?" I said, meeting her eyes. "You're right. I could use some air. But first, I have something to say." I turned to James. "Mr. Chen, the passive solar system you're so interested in? I designed it. Every calculation, every angle, every material choice. I also designed this entire lodge, from the foundation to the roof. Every innovation you see here came from my mind, my training, my vision." Sarah is brilliant at many things: marketing, networking, self-promotion. But she has never designed a single structure in her life. She couldn't read a blueprint if her life depended on it. The silence that followed was deafening. James's eyes widened. Several other guests who had wandered onto the deck turned to stare. Sarah's face went from pale to red to purple in the span of seconds. "You ungrateful little bitch," she hissed, abandoning all pretense of civility. "How dare you?" "How dare I tell the truth?" I shot back. "How dare I claim credit for my own work? How dare I exist as anything more than your shadow?" She grabbed my arm again, her nails digging in through my jacket. "We need to talk. Now. privately. She dragged me through the house to the kitchen, which had emptied as the catering staff took a break. The moment we were alone, she slapped me hard across the face. "You just destroyed everything," she snarled. "Everything I've built, everything I've worked for." "Everything you've stolen," I corrected, my cheek burning. "And I'm done letting you." She grabbed the portfolio I'd been carrying, the one with my original sketches, and before I could stop her, she'd thrown it into the massive fireplace. The papers caught immediately, years of work turning to ash in seconds. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now it's your word against mine. And who's going to believe you? The bitter, jealous sister who's been riding my coattails for years?" "Mom believed me," I said quietly. "She documented everything. She knew exactly what you were." Sarah went very still. "What are you talking about?" "She left videos, Sarah. Videos of me explaining every aspect of the design. Documents proving this was my project. A will that leaves everything to me." "You're lying." I pulled out my phone, found one of the videos, and hit play. Mom's voice filled the kitchen, clear and undeniable. Sarah's face went white as she heard our mother say, "The lodge is Bella's dream, her creation." "Give me that," Sarah demanded, lunging for my phone. I pulled it back, but she was faster, stronger from years of ski training while I'd spent my time hunched over drafting tables. She grabbed the phone and threw it against the stone wall where it shattered. Then she picked up my jacket, found the USB drive, and held it over the gas flame of the stove. "No!" I shouted, trying to grab it. She shoved me backward, hard. I stumbled, hit the counter, and fell. By the time I got up, the USB drive was melting, the precious videos destroyed. "You always were too sentimental," Sarah said, "keeping things in just one place." I, on the other hand, am thorough. She pulled out her own phone. "Dad?" "Yeah, we have a problem. Bella's having some kind of breakdown. She's making wild accusations, saying Mom left her everything. You need to call Margaret Chen and make sure that other will never sees the light of day. Yes, the one Mom filed when she was clearly not in her right mind." I listened in horror as she efficiently destroyed my last hope. Our father would do whatever Sarah asked. He always had, ever since she'd caught him having an affair years ago. That was her real power, not charm or talent, but the willingness to use any weapon at her disposal. "Now," she said, ending the call and turning back to me, "you're going to leave. Tonight. You're going to write a resignation letter citing mental health issues, and you're going to disappear. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this industry knows you're unstable, a pathological liar who tried to steal credit for her sister's work. I'll destroy you so thoroughly that you'll never work in architecture again." "This is my work," I said, tears streaming down my face. "This is my life." "Not anymore." She walked to the back door, the one that led out to the equipment shed, and opened it. The wind howled in, carrying snow that stung like needles. "Get out." "Sarah, it's a blizzard. I could die out there." "Drama queen as always. The shed has a heater. You can stay there tonight and think about your choices. In the morning, if you're ready to sign the resignation letter, you can come back in. If not," she shrugged. "Well, hypothermia makes people do crazy things. Wander off into the woods. Get lost. Sometimes they're never found until spring." I stared at her. This person who shared my blood, who'd grown up in the same house, who'd once been my sister in more than just name. I searched her face for any sign of humanity, any hint of the girl who'd taught me to ski, who'd held my hand at Mom's funeral. There was nothing there but cold calculation. "You want me to spend the night in the shed in a blizzard?" I said slowly. "You're actually doing this." "I'm giving you a choice," she corrected. "Sign the papers and leave quietly, or face the consequences. But either way, you're not spending another night in my lodge." "Your lodge," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "God, you almost believe it yourself, don't you?" She grabbed my coat from the hook and threw it at me. It was my light jacket, not the heavy parka I'd need for a night like this. Get out. Now. Or I call security and have you escorted off the property in front of all those influential people out there? Your choice. I put on the inadequate jacket, looked at her one more time, and walked out into the storm. The cold hit me like a physical assault. The wind was gusting at what had to be 40 miles per hour, driving snow horizontally across the deck. The shed was 50 yards away, barely visible through the white chaos. I fought my way toward it, each step a battle against the elements. Behind me, I heard the door lock. Through the kitchen window, I could see Sarah already on her phone again, probably spinning some story about her unstable sister who'd had to leave suddenly. By tomorrow, everyone at the party would believe whatever version of events she created. The shed, when I finally reached it, was locked. Of course it was. The heater she'd mentioned was inside, unreachable. I huddled against the wall that blocked the worst of the wind, pulling my jacket tighter, trying to conserve what little warmth I had. This was attempted murder, I realized. Sarah knew exactly what she was doing. She'd sent me out here to die, or at least to come close enough to death that I'd sign anything she wanted. And the worst part was, it would work. No one would question it. Sarah was the successful one, the charming one, the one everyone believed. I was just the weird sister who spent too much time alone with her blueprints. The cold was already seeping through my clothes, my body heat no match for the Arctic wind. I tried the shed door again, throwing my shoulder against it, but it held firm. The lock was new, I noticed with bitter irony. Industrial grade. Sarah had planned this. I couldn't stay here. I'd be dead within hours. But going back meant surrendering everything. My work, my legacy, my mother's wishes. Everything I'd built, everything I was, would become Sarah's. That's when I heard them. Wolves. Not close, but not far either. Their howls carried on the wind, wild and mournful. Sarah's words echoed in my memory. Go sleep with the wolves. Maybe they'll appreciate you. I laughed, or maybe it was a sob. The sound was lost in the wind. Here I was, literally cast out to the wolves by my own sister, freezing to death outside the lodge I'd designed. It was almost poetic in its cruelty. But as I stood there, something strange happened. The rage that had been building in me for years, the fury I'd always swallowed, always controlled, suddenly erupted. It was like a fire igniting in my chest, hot enough to push back the cold. I wasn't going to die out here. I wasn't going to give Sarah the satisfaction. And I sure as hell wasn't going to sign any resignation letter. I remembered something from the construction phase. The maintenance tunnel that ran under the lodge, connecting to the mechanical room. I'd insisted on it over Sarah's objections about cost, arguing that it would allow for equipment service even in severe weather. The entrance was hidden behind a ventilation grate on the north side of the building.